Hello, my friend. It's me. Hi. I am just gonna run you through like my course shell and Canvas, and just kind of show you what I did. And that maybe it can help you kind of get your thoughts together and get started. I'm happy to share this with you. Of course, please understand that when I taught this class for the first time, I hadn't taught 11th grade English in a really, really long time, American Lit. So I did probably worked harder than the kids did, trying to stay ahead of them and on top of them and that kind of thing. And so I know that you'll be way better at that than me for this particular one. Now, I bet I can beat you under the table with my British, but American, you've got me trumped all day long. So this is what I did. So and you can see from my syllabus kind of how I set it up, but this first, like 201 is the first part of American Lit all the way up to the mid-19th century. So 1865. So that covers colonial. It covered romantic movement. It covered the 15th and 16th century, so the explorers and that kind of thing. So what I did was I just kind of busted it into like three components, three major units, and I just labeled it by the movement that was happening at the time. So the colonial movement at the very beginning, was the first unit, and so on and so forth. So how I set it up was I gave the students a number of readings for each week that I wanted them to cover. When I started a new unit on a period of time, like for example, the colonial period was 1/3 of the course, so it was more than 1 week of work for the colonial movement. But at the very beginning of each unit, I would give them background notes that would contain like the historical context, the background information that they needed, as well as characteristics of the literature of the time period. And then those are the kind of things that I would base some of my test questions off of. So I would give them the notes, and like this one, I talked about Puritanism. I talked about each of the authors kind of like in detail in my notes. And I would then tell them, oh, well, at this point, read this text and pay attention in bold what this means. This was the city on a hill analogy and a model of Christian charity by John Winthrop. Explain what he means. What's the purpose of his speech? These types of questions are what I would kind of use for their writing assignment at the end of each week that they had to choose from. So they knew if they kind of saw this in bold that was kind of what they needed to be kind of looking for as they read for understanding, so that they could write about it later, so on and so forth. And I would do that. I did that for every single author in the unit. Then I would do text notes for each week, for each text. So I would do a screencast video too, by the way, where I kind of talk about everything, and I love screencasts. But this was an online class, so you're in person, so this, you may not want to do all these resources. I do these resources in case people are out, they can still get the content, and then most all of my kids are online. So, and then I would do text notes for each text or set of texts. And so in those text notes, I would just bust down the content of the text and point out symbolism and personification, source material, what the pieces and components meant. And then I would also discuss any of those questions that I had in bold that I had them pay attention to. I would discuss those things in my lecture, and then I would make a video on that as well. Then at the end of each week, they would do a writing assignment. And again, you have a lot of freedom. So it can be a discussion board post, it can be a short writing assignment, it can be a quiz. It doesn't have to be a discussion post. That's just what I chose to do, because I also taught 101 in multiple levels. So I taught 101 in person, I taught it online. I was reading X number of essays a week. I did not want to read larger pieces of text from them. You may choose to do that differently. You may want them to write something for you every week or every other week, a larger writing assignment. But that's just, again, totally up to you. I wanted my kids to write 1 to 2 paragraphs a week, because I felt like that was something that I could grade quickly and easily, and I kind of set it up after our CTE responses, and I'll show you what that is just really quick, that I taught them in 102. So it would have a claim, it would have textual evidence, it would have an explanation, kind of like this right here. So it would be like a 2 paragraph with textual evidence and that kind of thing in. That's what I asked for them for their discussion board post. Then they would have a prompt. So I would give them multiple ones to choose from, and they could pick one. They could choose one that they want to write about, and then they would write their claim, textual evidence, response, and response CTE thing on whatever text they chose. Like this girl chose from Deliverance of a Fever, and she said the theme of fiery death illustrates her Puritan ideology while incorporating her real world feelings, and she would provide textual evidence, and then she would explain that. Then once they did their own discussion board post, they would have to go in and write or respond to a classmate or another class or 2 classmates post about something, maybe the same thing, maybe a different text, because they had to be well versed in all of the texts by the end of the week, even if they just chose one to write about. So then at the end of each unit, we would have a test. And the way that I structured my test was pretty, simple. It would be, let me preview one so you can see. I would do a mix of questions. I would do multiple choice kind of questions where it was just like, hey, if you've read this text, you can figure that out. If you've read my text notes, if you listen to the screencast videos, these things you would know, right? In what way is Winthrop's Massachusetts Bay Colony similar to a city upon a hill? Those would be kind of a simple set of questions. And then I would have a author and matching with a text section. So they would have to come in and choose to match the author to the text. And those were kind of like, to me, kind of easy points. If they were keeping their own notebook and keeping all their stuff together, then that would be something they could study. And then I would give them also short answer questions along the way too. So it was kind of like a blend. Like we have some text dependent questions, we have some note dependent questions, like our lecture notes kind of thing. And then they would have something a little deeper that they would kind of have to dive into. So this one was like Emerson's epigraph for self-reliance, Ne te quaesiveris extra, so effectively sums up the overarching idea of the transcendentalist movement. Explain in your own words what this Latin phrase means in relation to self-reliance. And then they would have to respond in a paragraph to 2 paragraphs. So I felt like those are kind of... I feel like those were kind of running the gamut of test questions. It would give them some easy ones. It would give some tougher ones to kind of write about. But still, they had every opportunity to be successful if they were keeping up with the readings, if they were taking notes, if they were looking at my notes and viewing my screencast too along the way. So that's just basically what I did. Again, there's no handbook or manual that they're going to give you and say, here's how you should teach this. You kind of have a lot of freedom. You get to pick your text. You get to pick how you want it structured. It's really just kind of, and maybe that's what makes it better, even though it seems very overwhelming, because you really do have a lot of creative license. You can throw out text that you don't really like, which I did a lot. Colonial literature makes me just want to throw myself out a window. But to be fair, I hadn't had it in a long time, and I never really had a good teacher to teach me American Lit, with the exception of Dr. Witten. It's really kind of up to you. And so it can just be whatever you make it. But I'm willing to share all this stuff with you when you get your own shell or whatever you need, my notes and things like that, just so you can have a jumping off point so it won't be quite so overwhelming.